Okay, before we install this fender on the bike, we need to drill the holes in the fender for these two small screws. So what I do is I go ahead and put this bracket in the fender with the bolt sticking through the other side like that. You don't need to put this black one on. And then what I do is I kind of line it up and I drill the first hole with the drill we included. Then I put the screw in the hole and then leave the screw in there while you drill the second hole. That makes it a lot easier, and then the two holes will line up. And then when you get this back from paint, you can go ahead and assemble this. I put the nylock nuts on the inside, and don't get too carried away on these because these are small screws, so don't torque them too tight. And then this goes on this side like this. And then when you get it back, that's what it should look like on the outside. The screws are here, and there you have it. So go ahead and do that after the paint, assemble it. And then after the paint, I don't like you to do this before paint, otherwise you might get silicone on the paint, and then the paint would never stick. So I like to do this after paint. I'll show you how to do this. Okay, this is the bracket that goes under the back fender. Go ahead and use the silicone that we supply you, and go ahead and just put a great big bead of silicone down through the middle of this. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and put this under the fender. Now do this after paint, because if you get any of this silicone on the paint, your painter will hate you. So we use the screws from the struts with a rubber washer under them. And then we go ahead and just screw that in place like that. We supply you these nuts in the silicone bag. And then just go ahead and silicone that in place, and then snug those up, and then let it sit overnight if you can, and that way this will stay in the fender, and it'll be much easier to install the fender. Okay, grab this funny looking bracket here. This is mounts on the front and the bottom of the swing arm. These long bolts will go through the holes I'll show you on the swing arm, and then the nuts go on the top, and then the plate on the bottom. Now there's 3 sets of holes on there, and I'll show you what that means there, because these are, depending on your chain wear and the size of the tire, will mount this in a certain place. So I'll go ahead and show you how to mount this on the bike. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on this so I can kind of explain to you how that mounts on there. It's really simple. Okay, that mounts on the swing arm down there just like that. I think you can see that okay. I put some white paper in there, so hopefully you can see that real well. Okay, and then what I've done is there's some rubber grommets down in here. There's top and bottom. There's 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Just go ahead and pry those out with a screwdriver. And then this bracket fits in those holes. And the reason we use the nylock nuts is because I don't want that to ever vibrate and come loose. So it's a little bit of a pain tightening them up from the bottom, but you'll have to insert the screws up from the bottom. And then the plate is on the bottom. And then this big bracket here is on the top. And then go ahead and use whichever hole that you would like there to match the distance on the bracket that's away from the fender here. I'm going to show you that. Okay. Now this is about an inch right there. Inch or maybe a little more. You don't want to get it too close because the bolt and everything goes on the inside there, so you don't want that to scrape the fender. So go ahead and mount that according to the about an inch or so here, depending on the tire and the chain wear and stuff that you have. And then you can always change this later too if your chain does get worn. And then, okay, now don't over tighten these too much. When you're tightening these nuts, you'll feel them kind of get snug. If you go too much, you're just going to bend this bracket. So just snug to where they don't turn and the bracket won't move around. And then I'll get a view from the top. Now, that's what it'll look like when you look from the tire. So go ahead and mount that in there, and then we're about ready to stick this fender on here. It's really simple. Okay, next we're going to install the struts on the bottom of the shock bolts there. So what I want you to do is I want you to grab this side. This is the right side. Remove the bolt with the hole in it, and then we're going to go ahead and take this bolt out of the shock, and then we'll show you how to mount this on the bike. Okay, we're going to replace that bolt down on the bottom of the shock with our bolt that has the wire tie hole through it. And then if you'll notice, I'm using the washer that was with the bolt, and then I'm adding the lock washer that was with the our bolt. And I'm going to go ahead and coat this really well with blue Loctite. It's in the kit there. Go ahead and put blue Loctite on that. That'll be really nice, and then if you ever have to take it off, you can, but then it'll keep the vibration down from loosening the bolt up. So do that, and then we'll install this on the bike. Okay, I've installed this on the motorcycle. Just go ahead and snug this up just to where this won't move too much, because we're going to have to adjust that anyway. So just and do that to both sides, and then we'll go ahead and just lay that fender on there next. Okay, I've run that nylock nut down a ways. Just leave a gap there for the bracket, and then that'll save you having to screw that nylock nut so far when you put it down on the motorcycle there. Okay, now we want to slide the fender down in the bracket here. Just slide it down to the left and then slide it over and center it. And then just snug that bolt up just a little bit, just a way we can still slide that back and forth. We've designed this so that if you ever take the fender off, you just loosen the bolt and slide it out of the slot. You don't have to take that nut off. And then the washer is on the outside, the nut side. And then if you'll notice on the back here, I've installed my screws on the fender. These are the screws with the rubber washers on them. So go ahead and do that to both sides. Now you may have to get them to line up, you may have to adjust this the screw here. This is adjustable. This is adjustable up and down this strut, and you may have to adjust that up high enough to get those screws in there. So basically all we have to do is do that, and then we're going to align this fender and then safety wire those bolts on the bottom, and we're set to go. I've inserted the screws on the top, do both sides. And then what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and center the front first. Make sure that's centered on there, because if you don't do that, then the back will never line up. So make sure that the gap on the front, look at the back of the motorcycle, and make sure the gap on this side and then the other side are the same. And kind of snug that front bolt up a little bit so that holds that while you adjust the rear. And now it's really important that we get this fender on there straight, because nothing looks worse than to have our fender cockeyed on the tire. We go to great pains to bend these struts as close as we can for you, and hopefully you won't have to bend one side or the other a little bit, but if you have to, don't worry about it. Just bend it just a little bit and then reinstall it and make sure you don't overbend them. But it should line up pretty close. And then they are adjustable up and down, so they are slotted down here. You probably noticed that already. This is slotted, so you can raise and lower the strut on one side or the other, and that'll kind of help you center that fender too. And then what I want you to do also is as you're aligning this, you'll have to tighten the screws all the way, pretty snug, because that'll affect the alignment too. Same with the top. You'll have to snug those up pretty tight in order to get everything to align. So anyway, once you get this fender kind of aligned where you want it, and one other thing too, as you move the front bracket back and forth, that will also change the angle of the struts. So you kind of, worst case you may have to screw with that a little bit, but I think you should be okay without. So, and then, okay, what I want you to do is go ahead and kind of get that fender aligned. And then there's one more thing I want to do before we call this good on this fender. So be sure and skip to the next frame. Now it's real important too that we have enough gap under the screws down here. Be sure and check those really close. You want at least a 1/4 of an inch or more gap under that nut on the bottom there that's been welded on there. You don't want this to rub the fender, and it doesn't hurt to have it a little ways away. It still looks really nice. Okay, now that you've got your fender aligned, let's go ahead and do one more thing. And go ahead and take these two top screws out, and let's put some Loctite on them. That's really important too. Put some of the blue Loctite. That way you can get them out if you ever have to later. But you don't want these vibrating loose. So go ahead and Loctite those and then reinstall them. And then I want to show you how to safety wire the bottom screw too. So we'll go ahead and do that next. Last, we want to make sure we safety wire this bolt here, this screw, because we don't want that one coming out either. And I want to make sure that this doesn't ever come out on us. So in your kit, we supplied you 2 pieces of stainless steel wire. It's fairly thick, but it's easy to bend. And what I did is I just inserted it through the screw here, kind of made it flush with the bottom, and then I wrapped it around the shock. You can see the end there. And then I kind of snip it off. That way, you could even, as thick as this wire is, if you ever had to take that off, you could always take that wire off and rebend it and put it back on again. So anyway, just make sure it goes through the bolt and then wraps around the shock. You could even go around the strut here, but I think it looks a little nicer to go around the shock. And wraps around so that this can never come out. So do that on both sides, and then I think this fender's on there. Don't forget to tighten the front bolt. Snug that up again. And then it wouldn't hurt just to re-snug everything up. You don't want this fender to come loose. And there you have it. Check these bolts too after you ride.